Welcome back to the Checkdown Pod. We'll start off our first episode of the season with the check-in, where we'll recap some of our favorite games from the Week 1 slate. Next, we'll throw the red flag, each giving our hottest take from this past week's games. Then, we'll drop our top 5 power rankings. Finally, we'll conclude with a preview of this Thursday's matchup between the Vikings and the Eagles. I'm your host, Richard. Let's throw it to Harry, my co-host. How you doing?
Listen, I'm doing great. I waited way too long for these games, and they did not disappoint week one. It was a great slate. A lot of fantasy busts all around, but I really enjoyed what we had to watch this week.
Yeah, for sure. Really interesting games week one, starting on Thursday night. And just to go over how we're going to do things here, our plan is to every week talk about the primetime games. So Thursday night, Sunday night, and Monday night. And then we'll each pick a game that we particularly enjoyed and we'll highlight that. So we can start things off here with Thursday night's matchup of the Chiefs and the Lions. Harry's opening thoughts.
So I'm going to start with the winning team, which was the Lions. And I think that this was a really good win for them, and it really, it leads into the narrative that the Lions are like this, really good team that can win a playoff game this year, which they could, but it's a huge statement win for them. And the thing that I noticed the most from this game was Aiden Hutchinson. I mean, he was all over the place, even when what's his name? Right tackle. Jawan Taylor was
Jawan Taylor.
lining up like 10 feet in the backfield.
Very interesting
Aiden Hutchinson was
officiating.
still getting to him. And yeah, which I don't even know how that didn't get called every time. But
Yeah, no,
yeah,
definitely the Twitter refs were out in full force, begging for some
absolutely.
either false starts or I don't know what the technical term of that would be, but it seems like I think the rule is that the helmet has to cross the midsection or the belt area of the center, and he was just so clearly not there. So it's funny that they kept on getting away with that.
Yeah, just wasn't even remotely close. And that I thought that that was interesting. And also, we'll see how that can affect the Chiefs going on.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this was a Lions team that went into Lambeau last year to close out the season and kind of ruined Aaron Rodgers' final playoff hope. So from that moment, you saw them going 9-8 last year. That was encouraging if you're a Lions fan, and then to continue to build upon that with a pretty strong draft class, I think. Um, and we saw those rookies making some nice plays, whether it was Jahmyr Gibbs, who did well in limited touches. Brian Branch had obviously big night pick of the day, which is unfortunately for Patrick Mahomes' sake considered a pick, even though it was really more of an alley oop from Kadarius Toney.
It's
Um,
ridiculous.
and Jack Campbell is the third one who I wanted to point out who made some nice plays on defense as well. So anything else in specific about the Lions you want to talk about?
Last thing is that Ben Johnson, I don't know how, I mean, I know he didn't want to be a head coach, but I don't know how a team like the Cardinals just didn't offer him every dollar that they have to just come to them because he's just such a phenomenal play caller, and it's like week after week. Um, you see that. And one other thing I noticed, which I didn't even really pick up on until recently, is Jared Goff is so good at avoiding sacks. And like obviously the Lions offensive line is really good, but Jared Goff just consistently, and I've been looking back on this for a couple of years, is like in the top five in lowest pressure to sack ratio. He's just so good at not taking sacks. And I've never picked up on that. And
That's
so
that's very interesting for a guy you don't consider mobile or particularly agile in the pocket to be
yeah,
so good at
really.
avoiding sacks. It's very good pocket awareness.
Yeah, and you really saw it this week and all of last year. And yeah, credit to Jared Goff.
Yeah, and I'm going to take that and build off that because that was going to be my first point on the Chiefs. If you're the Chiefs, I think even though it's a loss, you got to be encouraged about a couple of things from this game. Um, the defense was without Chris Jones was getting good pressure on Jared Goff against a good offensive line, and they defense as a whole, really nice game for the cornerbacks, particularly Trent McDuffie, uh, who was like kind of, I don't want to say locking down Amon-Ra St. Brown, but they held him in check. And
Definitely.
yeah, I think the Chiefs defense, if you're Andy Reid, at least on the defensive side of the ball, you have to be encouraged to see a Chris Jones-less unit play pretty well against what is shaping up to be and what was last year one of the NFL's premier offenses.
Yeah, absolutely. And continuing to build on that, I think like for the Chiefs defense, just speaking on it, this is absolutely the most complete defense. And this was even without Chris Jones, but once Chris Jones comes back, because they just locked him up to a 1 year extension. Once he's back for the rest of the year, this will undoubtedly be the most complete defense in the Patrick Mahomes era. And even though when you look at the offense, it's really just Mahomes and Kelsey and just no one. I mean, Mahomes can make magic with Kelsey, and as long as you can catch the ball, Mahomes can make magic. Um, and Kelsey can catch the ball, so I'm like really high on what the Chiefs have going.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think the Chiefs, even though, I mean, we'll get to this in the power rankings, but even though a loss, they played, I think, with the exception of Kadarius Toney and some of the other receivers, played a pretty good, solid game.
Yeah.
Anything else to add on either the Chiefs or the victorious Lions?
Um, no, I think the biggest thing is that while watching this game, this is the last thing I have, but while watching this game and, watch it, specifically the offense, there were just so many times on like third downs where I'm like, oh, this ball's going to Kelsey, but Kelsey's just not on the field. And it was an incompletion, it was whatever. There are just so many third downs historically where the Chiefs have just leaned on Kelsey, and that's where he's gotten a lot of his yardage or in the red zone. And he just wasn't available for them. And I think that hurt their offense like very clearly. So I think going forward, we should be looking at a very good Chiefs team.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see because you could for sure who's the other weapon. Historically, Patrick Mahomes has had Tyreek Hill, obviously not last year, but he's had Tyreek Hill, he's had Kareem Hunt. And now to pair with Kelsey, and now what do you do here? We saw some key drops even from Sky Moore. So Justin Watson getting involved. Just this like I, kind of choir of receivers that they've got going on there with no real lead singer and someone to star in that offense. It'll be interesting to see who gets the touches. Rashee Rice had a nice game, but
Yeah.
it'll be interesting to see moving forward how teams can shut down Kelsey or at least try and contain him, and who becomes the second option for Mahomes.
Yeah. All things that I think we'll get more clarity to next week once Chris Jones comes back, once Kelsey's back, and you'll see the real Chiefs because this didn't feel like the real Chiefs to me.
Yes, I think I think Mike Tirico got a little flack for calling it an asterisk win for the Lions, but there was definitely the Chiefs from on their end have to be thinking that okay, we're still in pretty good shape. We'll see our complete team, and as you said, the real team is looking like next week.
Yeah. And I wouldn't even go as far to call it an asterisk win for the Lions because you play who's in front of you, and they did, and they beat who was in front of them. But I would call this an asterisk loss for the Chiefs because this just wasn't the full Chiefs.
That's a really good way to put it. So moving on,
We'll start with the Bengals Browns.
Joe Burrow, what's going on there?
Listen, for me, the way I saw this game, from what I've seen, people are calling it like the weather was just like abysmal and that like people who were at the game were soaked. And like, I mean, when you watch both Watson and Burrow throw, even though Watson definitely looked better than Burrow, you can see that neither of them really had a full grip on the ball. And also, if we take it back to last year's week one, Joe Burrow threw like 6 interceptions week one
Oh
and
yeah,
then
I
went
forgot
on
about that.
to have like an MVP rest of the season where he honestly maybe looked better than Mahomes the rest of the season. I mean, you could say what you want. Him or Mahomes both had a great season. I'm not here to say all that, but point being is that last year we saw Joe Burrow and the Bengals do the exact same thing. And listen, history does not always repeat itself, but I'm just not worried about the Bengals.
That's interesting. I think, yeah, to your point about the grip on the ball, we saw Burrow even experiment with a glove, which I don't think he's ever done before. Um, and interesting, like let's flip it to the Browns here because they played a really good game at home against being the underdogs. Let's start here at the defense. Myles Garrett, what an absolute
Oh,
menace.
dude, watching this game, I just looked at Myles Garrett and I was in awe. He is so good. They were lining him up wherever. They were lining him up on the edge. They were lining him up in the A gap, and he was just toying with the Bengals. He was doing like crossovers before, like whatever they just couldn't stop him. It was terrifying.
Yeah, I think he did a crossover and then proceeded to just roll right over Ted Karras, the center for the Bengals.
Who's a very good center too. He's not a scrub either. And they were double teaming him. They were chipping him. Whatever you could think about, they were doing, and they couldn't stop him. He looked unbelievable.
And I think to add to that, I want to talk about Zadarius Smith. Seems like a very nice addition to this defensive line.
Yeah, Zadarius Smith and Dalvin Tomlinson, who, former very good New York Giant. I mean, he rushes the passer. He's just very good. He's not like flashy. He's just very good. He takes up space and he rushes the passer. And so that leaves more room for Zadarius Smith. Specifically, Zadarius Smith was getting all the one-on-ones in the world, and he was really getting to the passer. And Myles Garrett was even getting a little open. It was just this defense is up there with the Niners and the Cowboys, and you can't convince me otherwise.
Ooh, wow. That might have been a hot take there. A
Yeah,
little jump
maybe
in the
maybe I should
gun.
have left that for later.
No, I think that, yeah, you want to talk about the defense. The secondary also, I know you're a big Greg Newsome fan, and he had a great game, as did Denzel Ward.
Yeah. I mean, this from everywhere. Another guy, you talking about those two corners, but Grant Delpit. I mean, he had. I don't remember who this was on. I think it was T. Higgins. There was this ball in the air, and just Grant Delpit, who is just not the size of T. Higgins. It might have been Jamar Chase, but regardless, a 50-50 ball should not be a 50-50 ball when it's like Jamar Chase or T. Higgins versus Grant Delpit. And Delpit made the play, and he just looked really good today all around.
Yeah. Do you have anything else on the Browns here, or do you want to say anything on the Bengals?
Last thing on the Browns, I just don't know how to evaluate what I saw from Deshaun Watson because there were just plays where he looked like Deshaun Watson of 2019, was it? Or 2020. And then there were some plays where he just couldn't grip the ball. And I don't know if it was inaccurate because he couldn't grip the ball because we saw a lot of that last year where he could grip the ball and it was just inaccurate. But maybe I just don't know what to evaluate from him. And I think I really want to wait till next week because just my gut feeling gives me the benefit of the doubt for him. And I think he's really back.
Yeah, I mean he's definitely missed a lot of time between holding out for the right deal and his suspension, but it'll be interesting to see. You think a quarterback of his caliber should be able to lead a team with pretty great weapons on offense between Amari Cooper and Nick Chubb and David Njoku. I like the Elijah Moore pickup for them was key. They used him in some very creative ways. So you'd think that if he's back, that's big things for them in the AFC North.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Browns could really be the surprise team where everybody was talking about the Bengals, everybody was talking about the Ravens. Some people were even chatting about the consistency of the Steelers. Look out for the Browns, man. They look dangerous.
Yeah. Now on the flip side, do you have anything to say on the Bengals?
Not really, not too much to say. I think that was just a poor performance, and we'll talk about them a little bit later in the power rankings and how I see them moving forward.
Okay, we'll get to them later. So now next up for the next game, we got the Miami Dolphins and the Chargers squaring up on the West Coast. Right off the bat, a big QB duel from, I mean, both teams in the same draft class, picks number
Yeah.
5 and 6. What did you see from Tua? What did you see from Herbert?
All right, we'll start with Tua because I've been a little bit not a Tua hater, but it's just no matter where the progression for Tua goes, I'm just always like slightly behind consensus, which I guess would make me a hater, but I go up with the progression. But I'm now at the point where what I saw, if he can replicate it, this was only 1 week, but if he can replicate what he did this week, and not like in the box score, but what he did while I was watching the game, he might be a top 7 quarterback in the NFL right now, which is really rich for me, who was saying he was like 15th before. He looks like the most cracked out version of Jimmy G possible, where he's getting the ball out quick. He's super accurate, and he's finally hitting Tyreek Hill on time. God bless him. He looks like just a new quarterback, and I love it.
Yeah, well, you certainly think he's a guy. He's got to be worth Daniel Jones money, right?
And then some.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if the Dolphins give him a new contract and how large the sum is. Um, now on the flip side, what did you think about Herbert's performance?
I think Herbert played well. There were a lot of plays where I was just watching him and I was like, this guy is just so good. But, and like, I had those plays in my head, but the whole time I was watching the game, I was just, it wasn't fair watching, like, even though Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, and Quinn Johnston are good, just what Tyreek Hill does to just be open in the blink of an eye is it just there was like a complete disparallel between I don't even know if that's a word,
We'll
but
make it a
yeah,
word.
yeah, we'll make it a word for this. It was completely unfair. Um, but Herbert still looked pretty good. He was kind of doing his thing, dotting him up. It was a natural Herbert performance. I don't take really that much away from it.
Yeah, any thing to talk about? Anything else to talk about for this offense for the Chargers?
Finally, they're able to run the ball. And if you remember from last year, one of my hot takes was that the Chargers should draft a running back in the first 2 rounds, whether that's Bijan or whether that's, and it was not a Jameer Gibbs type, even though I would have been fine with it, but it was a Zach Charbonnet, a Bijan Robinson, one of those guys who they can just pound the rock with and, whatever. And I guess they didn't need to because they were just doing it with Josh Kelly. And listen, however they can run the ball, they can run the ball. If it's with the people that they have in house, that's perfect. It's even better. And listen, I hope it wasn't just a 1 week thing because if they can continue to run the ball, I think this offense looks deadly.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you definitely saw the Kellen Moore effect coming over and to coach that offense up. Uh, they looked like a whole different unit and they looked reinvigorated in the run game.
Yeah. And people fail to realize that, like, a lot of people are kind of just like pushing back on the Chargers. Like, I saw Emmanuel Achu, known Justin Herbert hater, just like hating on Herbert and the Chargers. They put up like what 34 points was it?
I think that was the final
Yeah.
score,
Like
38
it was
to
36-34, I think. They put up 34 points. That offense looked real good. Now the defense, there was a lot of question marks, but also I believe in this team and I think Tua was just piecing them up.
Yeah. Any concerns about, they paid JC Jackson a lot of money. Any concerns about the secondary in particular?
Um, I mean, I do have concerns about JC Jackson, but they're not any new concerns. I've had those concerns for a while. The cornerback in crew just doesn't look that good, but I think the front seven looks real good. Obviously Derwin is Derwin, and I think this defense with Brandon Staley will be fine in the end because it is a good defense.
Yeah, definitely a good team that played a decent week one. I mean, they had a tough matchup and it was a tough loss. I think they were one of the best games of the slate, if not the best one.
Yeah, definitely, definitely the most entertaining of the slate.
Um, next? Are you ready to move on?
Yeah,
Unfortunately.
let's unfortunately talk about the Giants versus the Cowboys.
Yeah. Um, Anything to talk about on the Giants offense?
Yeah, I got a lot to talk about. So all around, this was just terrible to watch. But let's start off from where it really was awful. Is the offensive line was just absolutely abysmal, except Andrew Thomas, who was pretty okay, and he was dealing with a hamstring thing, so he's fine. And in the rain, he's fine. And also, I'll give JMS as at least as a blocker. I'll give JMS whatever because he's a rookie. It was his first game
First
against
game,
the
yeah.
best defense in the NFL, and he didn't even look that bad. So Andrew Thomas and JMS are fine. Everybody else, they I hope that they ran after that game because that was abysmal. They should be doing laps. Mark Lewinsky gave up like what was it, 34% of the pressures in just this game that he did all of last season. He was getting
No.
pieced apart. Evan Neal just looks like a complete bust. It just that it was just awful. They were just running laps. The Cowboys front seven on the Giants offensive line, and it was abysmal.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of hope among Giants fans and even like the NFL consensus in general was that Evan Neal would take kind of that Andrew Thomas level leap. Um, Obviously not to become an upper echelon tackle right away, but to show some strides of improvement. And he had a tough matchup against Micah Parsons, but he looked just completely outmatched.
Yeah, and there were even plays where he just wasn't lined up against Micah Parsons, and like Sam Williams is a good edge rusher, but it's like I can't give you the Micah Parsons excuse if Sam Williams is piecing you up. Like it was ridiculous. And I think, listen, the harsh truth is that he might be a little bit of a bust. We might need to start having that conversation about Evan Neal.
Yeah, it's definitely he still has time, and we'll see how
Definitely.
Brian Daboll gets his players to respond. Um, because it was a very uninspiring performance from the rest of the team as well. It's not like do you have anything positive to say about the Giant offense?
So I have nothing positive to say about this offense, really. But as far as future outlook goes for the Giants, here's some things that I noticed. So one thing that, first of all, this was just the perfect storm for them to play terribly. Um, but one thing that's very important to note is that when I was watching this game, I don't remember who I saw pointed out, but somebody pointed out on Twitter that a lot of John Michael Schmitz's snaps were low. And I don't know if that has to do with the rain or what that has to do with, but you could see that it really messed up Daniel Jones's timing. And there was a play where it was just a low snap, and Daniel Jones just scrambled immediately. He didn't even look to see who was there, and it was obviously it was not a designed run. And he darted because he knew the pressure was going to be in his face, so he just darted immediately, and you could tell that that really messed them up, and it messed up um that third down where there was the fumble and then the blocked kick for a touchdown, which really messed up the whole game. So I don't know if that's going to be a lingering issue for the Giants or what that's going to be like, but you can see that that's been a little bit of an adjustment. And if that can get sorted out, then I actually think that this Giants offense will be in a much better position. But if not, that will really plague the Giants all season long because you could see it really messed up that the timing on the quick passes that they were so successful on last season.
That's interesting. I didn't even realize that while watching the game, but that would seemingly explain some of Daniel Jones kind of abandoning his progressions and just looking for the scramble.
Yeah, so that was definitely something that you would hope that they would have gotten out of John Michael Schmitz in preseason and training camp. But if it was a rain thing, then I feel good about the season going forward.
It's interesting also with the offensive line. Do you think that there'll be an early shift in the guard rotation? Maybe see some Josh Zudu coming in there, or do you think Dayball's just going to stick with it?
Listen, I mean, Ben Bredesen didn't look too bad, so I think he'll probably stay on the left side, especially because, it is still the Cowboys. So, and everything was just going terribly, like I can understand. But I think, you know, anybody. They can pick a fan to come in for Glowinski at this point because I mean, I'll give him another game. I'll give him one more game. But if he plays like that again, you put in anybody and you call it a day.
Yeah, for sure. Poor performance from the Giants offense, to say the least. Um, Anything else before we move on to the Cowboys?
No, no, that's thank God that's all for the Giants.
Yeah, so I'll start here with the Cowboys offense actually. And one thing that I saw, and very exciting for me as a big Tony Pollard fan, finally without Zeke, he's getting the carries and he looks the part. He looks like a true bell cow running back.
Yeah, absolutely. As a Tony Pollard fantasy owner, all are in like many leagues. I love to see it. And I just love watching that guy run the football. He's so elusive, and you love to see it.
Yeah, definitely a guy who was a fantasy target of mine. I have him in a couple of weeks as well. So that may or may not be influencing my admiration for his
That
performance,
is
but
true.
it was definitely a fun game for the Cowboys just to run up the score. Did you see anything out of Dak that was encouraging or anything that was holding you back?
There's nothing really to talk about from Dak. I mean, I didn't really see anything encouraging, but I also this is kind of like a negligible week for the Cowboys passing offense, let's say.
Yeah. Anything else on the Cowboys defense?
So one thing I noticed is that I think really takes their defense to new heights. Obviously the defense was overall very impressive and the pass rush was amazing, but it's kind of been like that. But one thing that I think really elevates them is the addition of Stephon Gilmore, who looks really, really good. And he allows Trayvon Diggs to kind of be this cornerback too, who can kind of play the ball hawk, which is really what he does so well. So that's really nice. And then also Stephon Gilmore's kind of biggest limitation at this point is his athleticism as he's getting up there in age. But if the pass rush is going to get there so quick, it's not like Stephon Gilmore is going to have to be defending these double moves on from receivers because I mean the pass rush is just there, and he's just so good at understanding what you're trying to do as a route runner, and I think that he's going to bring this Cowboys defense to just a whole new level this year.
For sure. I really like that addition in the offseason, and you saw it paying immediate dividends here on Sunday night.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anything else from this game before we move on?
No, that's really all I got.
Yeah. Okay. So now we got to move on to Monday night. What was supposed to be this homecoming and let's let's go for the Jets. Uh, really, really just in true Jets fashion was immediately just over 4 plays in. Um, Obviously, I'm talking about Aaron Rodgers tearing his Achilles. Um, you can't see my face, but it's just a classic Jets moment that you got to learn to deal with if you're going to be a fan of this franchise. Um, yeah, if you want to take it away and talk about what you saw from Aaron Rodgers, no, there's nothing to talk about. 3 snaps, but let's talk about the Jets offense in this game.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, first of all, Bruce Hall is just an absolute beast. He's just so good. And really he's the entire offense to some degree or another, at least if the Jets are going to be a team that can sneak into the playoffs, or a very competitive team week to week. Um, but one thing I listen, as the biggest Zach Wilson truther out there, I think that Zach Wilson has untapped potential that I think he'll display this season. It won't be this week because I think they're playing the Patriots this week, so that's a tough
I
matchup
think
for them.
they got the Cowboys first and then the
Oh, you're right.
Patriots.
It's the Cowboys and then the Patriots. So two
Yeah,
difficult teams. So I don't think we'll see it in these next 2 weeks. I think give it time. But they play the Chiefs week 4, I think, or maybe week 5. They play the Chiefs somewhat soon,
I think
and
week 5. Yeah,
I'd like to see how Zach Wilson plays there. And I think he's actually like not that inaccurate a lot of people like to call him inaccurate, but like at least from this game, he was actually very accurate. His biggest issue was just like dealing with pressure was one big issue for him. He has just got the worst pocket presence and mobility really, even for because he's so athletic, but his pocket mobility when it comes to like an IQ perspective is just deplorable. Um, and then just making stupid decisions like that interception, he threw it into triple coverage. What are you doing, man? Like it's like a Madden interception where you press the wrong button. Just like it was terrible. But other than that, there was actually a lot of promising signs where he was just like, I mean, he throws lasers and he's like not terribly inaccurate. So I actually think that there's a little something there for the Jets this season with Mr. Zach Wilson.
For Jets fans' sake, I hope you're right. And definitely there's some encouraging moments, like the Allen Lazard throw on third down, I believe. That was pretty impressive to find the open man. Um, the touchdown pass was not a good pass, but you know what? Garrett Wilson is just so good that
He's him.
against Tre'Davious White was able to, I don't know how he juggled and corralled that ball, but you know what? I'll take it. And just one last thing to point out about this offense is the offensive line is a very interesting group because you got Mekhi Becton playing his first game in about 2 full seasons, and he, I thought he looked pretty good. Um, I think he had one play where he allowed a pressure, but I think it was designed to be a quick pass, and he went for the low block. Um, so he allowed, I believe that was Greg Rousseau to come off the edge there. Um, but I thought he looked good. Elijah Vera Tucker, I think, played a very nice game. Um, but the left side of the offensive line was a little concerning. You had the veteran Dwayne Brown not looking too great, and Laken Tomlinson. They paid him big money to come over from San Francisco, and he has just, after a down year this year, did not look good against a Von Millerless Bills pass rush um, in this week.
Yeah, and I mean you're immediately feeling the effects of the Steelers jumping the Jets for Broderick Jones. I mean, Broderick Jones was my number one tackle, just mildly ahead of Paris Johnson. Who actually I don't know why he didn't play this week barely, but he didn't. And you just feel like if the Jets had like a young athletic offensive tackle like Broderick Jones, you just feel so much more confident in what they have, especially when you take into account Zach Wilson's limitations under pressure. If you can get him a clean pocket, I actually think you have a lot going, and you saw that there was clearly issues with that on the left side of the line.
Yeah, I mean, there's the Jets offense, it's a group that I think they seemingly wanted Jahmyr Gibbs in the draft. So it seemed like they would have liked to address a little more in the offseason. I personally was not a fan when they passed on Jackson Smith and Jigba in favor of adding more depth to the D line. Um, but I hope that in the coming weeks you can continue to see Garrett Wilson used in creative ways to just get his hands on the football. Maybe get some Nicole Hardman action and on some gadget plays, but something to just keep it simple for Zach Wilson.
Yeah, absolutely. Just plays where he has a guy open. He can, use that arm that he has. And, the accuracy again looked good this week from what I saw. And just, throw darts in there.
Yeah, you want to flip it to the Bills offense now?
Yeah, I mean, the Bills offense looked just terrible. I mean, at times it was moving, but and really it wasn't the Bills offense. We'll take it back a step. It was really Josh Allen who just
Yeah.
looked awful. There was no excuse. I'm a fan of aggressiveness, but there's a difference between throwing a 50-50 ball to Gabe Davis and throwing it into triple coverage. And I was watching back the interceptions, and there was only one interception where it was like, this is a bad throw and not just a horrendous throw. Um, which is just hard to say when you're talking about Josh Allen, who's, a top five quarterback. Some even think he's, the second best quarterback. Some think he's the best. It's hard to look at when you're talking about a quarterback that good.
Yeah,
And yeah, that's really it.
I was gonna say it seemed a little bit like shades of rookie Josh Allen, where he was kind of just heaving the ball no matter what into that coverage. And it was interesting because even Sauce Gardner did not play his best game. Stephon Diggs was really, I think, maybe even Sauce's worst game as a pro, if you want to say that. And
You could
he
definitely argue that.
he did not look great. Um, but Josh Allen kept on bailing out and looked like his number one target all night was Jordan Whitehead.
Yeah, definitely. He needs to learn that Jordan Whitehead is not a Buffalo Bill.
Yeah. Uh, any thoughts on James Cook and the Bills running game?
I thought it looked pretty good. I thought it looked serviceable for what the Bills need. The Bills have never had a great running game, and it doesn't look like it's going to be great under James or with James Cook, but I think it's a little bit of a step up from what they had with just Devin Singletary and when they had Zach Moss back in the day.
Yeah.
Um, but it's nothing special.
Yeah, for sure. I think there are some concerns about the weapons, but I hope at least for the Bills that they continue to get Dalton Kincaid more involved, and I think Dawson Knox has talent, Gabe Davis has talent, and obviously you have Stephon Diggs. So it's a pretty good skill position group. And listen, as you said, it all comes down to Josh Allen, and he just did not have it this week. So let's see if they can bounce back next week in the offense at least. Anything now you want to talk about the Jets defense here?
Yeah, I mean the Jets defense looked as good as it always does from the edge rushers, Jermaine Johnson. I think he had a sack in there. He looked real good. Quinn Williams looked good. Sauce actually didn't look too good, but listen, he'll be okay. He'll bounce back. Jordan Whitehead looked real good. It was just the Jets just played like the Jets defense usually do, and you got to feel good about that if you're a Jets fan because that's what, in my opinion, was going to carry them to the playoffs this year with Rodgers, and I think still can carry them to the playoffs with Zach Wilson.
Yeah, I think one guy you didn't mention there that I want to kind of give a shout to, Quincy Williams, who's gone from waiver claim to like got a 3-year extension this offseason. He looked really good. He was flying all over the field. I think I read something about how a player with his speed, you kind of have to learn to slow down in order to make the plays. And you definitely saw him do that. He was just flying all over the field, making tackles. And yeah, the group as a whole, like you said, it looked like a Robert Saleh defense. And I wouldn't be surprised if by year's end you see Jeff Ulbrich, the defensive coordinator, getting some head coaching interviews.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely should have mentioned Quincy Williams, and he really did look amazing. So great shout out.
Yeah, and finally, you want to talk about the Bills defense?
Yeah, the Bills defense looked good, but not great. It looked okay, and they're a better defense than they looked. I mean, you still have you got Trey White, who I mean, he had a lot of Garrett Wilson on him, so that's tough. But you still want to see him win that matchup because you're talking about a really good receiver against a really good corner. And if you're the Bills, you want to see that you want to see yourself win that matchup. But overall, I don't really have that much to say about it.
Yeah, I think overall you could the return of Von Miller will definitely help this group, but I think it was a solid performance from a pretty good defense.
Yeah,
Finally, just before we move on, I just got to mention Xavier Gibson, the undrafted rookie out of Stephen F. Austin, with that crazy punt return to end it. Uh,
that was beautiful.
yeah, I mean, as a Jets fan, the game went from like pure despair to elation there at the end. What a way to end it. What a great feeling for a guy who I think a lot of people saw on Hard Knocks, thought he was getting cut, and then wound up making the team. So that was a great moment there for a really special or really special teamer. Um,
Yeah, I mean that it's just one of those feel good moments that you see that, and then you watch the clip of Hard Knocks. You just can't not smile. It's just
yeah,
awesome.
and even post game, he said he was going to give the game ball to his mom, which I think you got to smile about that.
It's just amazing, man.
Yeah, it was a great moment to cap off a very mixed night for the Jets.
Absolutely.
Um, and now you want to move on to our power rankings,
Uh, yeah, sure. Let's talk about our power rankings. Um, or should we start with the hot take?
whatever you want.
Let's start with the hot take because I gotta go on a huge rant here. All right, so my hot take is gonna listen. Someone's gonna say it's because I'm a homer, but the Cowboys are the most overrated team.
Ooh,
Now listen. They played great, so obviously I want to shout them out, and the defense is super legit, but they still don't inspire me as a contender against other teams like the Niners and the Eagles. And I definitely think that they can win a playoff game, but I don't think that this is anything new than what we thought about them going into the season. And this performance was amazing. But last year they did the exact same thing against the Vikings, but it was like week 11 or week 12 or something. It was the middle of the season. Nobody cared. We already knew what the Cowboys were. They beat the Vikings 40-3. Doesn't matter. They're still the same Cowboys. Um, and as a team, they felt like they were a team that's equipped to win in that weather, a team that can run the ball, a team that has a really good defense, and a team that wins in the trenches. And that's a team that wins in these kinds of conditions. And listen, the Giants just looked really bad, and I think it makes the Cowboys look a lot better. And there was a point in the game where Isaiah Hodgins fumbled the ball, and Mike Torino says he fumbles because of course he does. And he just points out the fact that everything was going wrong for the Giants, and this was just the perfect storm for the Cowboys. And listen, I think the Cowboys are a great team at the end of the day, but I'm seeing in a lot of power rankings, people are having them at one, which is crazy, in their top three or their top five. And I just can't get behind that yet. I'm going to need to see a little bit more from them before I can put them in there because I think that this is something that we've seen from them in the past, just maybe in the middle of the season as opposed to week one. And so there's a lot of week one overreactions right now.
yeah, no, for sure.
Okay.
I think that's a pretty good take. I mean, you're with the Giants connection. I'm sure you're seeing more Cowboy stuff than I am, but definitely there's a lot of hype coming off this team in week one. The defense obviously played incredible, but I agree with you. It's the offense and Dak Prescott are they good enough to reach that upper echelon of NFC teams?
Yeah. And it feels like you're just not seeing the consistency from Dak Prescott. Like on some weeks he looks like, a top five quarterback, and on some weeks he looks like he should, not even be a starter. And so it's that week to week consistency that you just don't get from Dak Prescott that definitely scares me.
Yeah, I think that that's a hot take, but a fair one.
Absolutely.
So now moving on to my hot take. This is also going to be similar to yours. The Bills are not the best team in the AFC East. And I'm saying you can throw the Dolphins in there. Obviously, it's hard to make an argument for the Jets without Aaron Rodgers, but we did just see them beat them. Um, the Patriots looked good against the Eagles, I thought. Um, but Josh Allen playing the way he did, is it a fluke or is it some regression from Josh Allen? That kind of scares me. The defense couldn't really stop Zach Wilson. I mean, they did a good job, but they still allowed that kind of game time drive at the end there, with capped off by the Garrett Wilson touchdown. Um, yeah. Any thoughts on that?
I actually wholeheartedly agree. And I think one thing about the Bills that's so concerning is that you're not going to get these types of three turnover games from Josh Allen again. I really think it's not going to happen. I don't think the Bills are going to play this bad again. But for a while, Josh Allen's been doing these kinds of things where it's like you'll see Mahomes make these like 50-50 balls that turn into turnovers. You'll see, Burrow do that, Hurts do that. Every good quarterback who's, going for explosive plays is going to have that happen. But sometimes we'll see Josh Allen throw interceptions where it's just like, I have no clue what you saw there. You just threw it up because you were like you didn't have anything to do, so you just chucked it 50 yards down the field. And he's been doing that for a while now, and this was really just the culmination of him doing it play after play. And so while I don't think we'll see this exactly happen again, I think it does show Josh Allen's biggest weakness is that he can't really control the football.
Yeah. I think that with agreeing with your points about the Bills there, I'm just going to give some credit and love to the Dolphins, who look like a really, really good offense. You see Tua, as you mentioned earlier, he's hitting Tyreek in stride. If he's going to continue to hit Waddle in stride and get these guys big play machines. Josh Allen, you're seeing on the big plays, he's turning it over a lot, and that'll happen. But if he continues to play reckless football, then this high-powered Dolphins offense could give them the edge in the NFC or the AFC East.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely agree with that.
Yeah. Anything else on hot takes, or should we move on to the power rankings?
Let's move on to these power rankings. All
Okay.
right,
Well,
so I think we should go like team by team. Not team by team. Like I say fifth, you say fifth. I say like that. Okay, so I'm gonna give before I say my number 5 team, I'm gonna give an honorable mention to my number 16, which is the Cleveland Browns of all teams.
oh,
Um, I want to see more from them, but I so badly like my gut tells me they're a top 5 team, but I can't put them in right now. And yeah, but I just wanted to give a huge shout out to them at number 6. So at number 5, to your point, the Miami Dolphins are my number 5 team. The passing attack just looks so unstoppable, and when you have these weapons, it just feels like I actually don't know what you do to game plan against the Dolphins right now. I literally have no clue what you do because Tua just looked so dominant, and it looks like there's nothing you can do to stop them. So yeah, and they have. I think they play New England this week. And so we'll see how that goes for them because New England looked good, and New England is always tough when you're going up against Belichick. But right now, I got them at number 5.
well, yeah. I we'll get to them a little later for me, um, pretty shortly. But for my number 5 team, I'm going to go with the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Ooh, I love it.
I I think this offense has the potential to be something special. You got Calvin Ridley looking like old Calvin Ridley. You got Zay Jones looking good. You didn't even see Christian Kirk involved too much after kind of proving everyone wrong about the contract last year. Um, I like Travis Etienne. I like Tank Bigsby. It's a decent offensive line and a very fun defense with young studs like Tyson Campbell and Josh Allen. Um, I think they can make a run in a coming out of a weak division in the AFC.
Yeah, absolutely. I really like that. They're not really in my top 5, but I absolutely love that, and I definitely think that that offense looks real good, especially with Calvin Ridley now. And yeah, I love it.
Let's move on to number 4 here. So who do you got for
So
4?
for my number 14, this may surprise some, but I'm gonna stay with the Cincinnati Bengals. Um, they were my number 2 team going into the year, but I'm gonna drop them down just a little bit because they didn't look good, but I'm not worried about it. I still have to drop them a little bit, but they've done this in the past. We already talked about this a little bit, but they've done this in the past, and they were fine. So yeah, not at all worried.
Interesting. For me, they're the team that just missed the cut at number 6. I'm just going to give the edge to the slightly hotter Jacksonville Jaguars and team that you mentioned, Miami Dolphins, for me coming in at number 4. Uh, Pretty much all the stuff you mentioned. The offense has 2 elite wideouts in Hill and Waddle. Tua looks really good. It's a defense that I think could, Mike McDaniel known for his offense, but it's a solid defensive unit. They got some guys in Christian Wilkins, and I think we'll see. Uh, I don't know. Jalen Ramsey's when is he supposed to be? He's
I think he doesn't come back till
back.
like week 8,
Yeah,
but yeah, once Jalen Ramsey comes back, this defense does explode.
yeah. So it's a fun team for me. Like all the stuff you mentioned, it's really based on their high-powered offense, and I could see them making a run in the AFC.
Absolutely. I love it. For my number three, I'm gonna kind of go a little bit chalky. I'm gonna stay chalk actually, and I'm gonna pick the Eagles. Their step down in play calling with Steichen going over to the Colts does worry me a little bit, and the play calling didn't look that good when I was watching this game, but it was against a good Patriots defense. I think there was some rain, but I could be wrong.
No,
Um,
I think you're right.
yeah, especially every game in New England is
New
rain.
England, yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, I still have a lot of faith in the Eagles. That Eagles defense is amazing, even with the injuries that they have. And Jalen Carter looked unbelievable.
Yeah.
He looked like everything he was advertised out of Georgia. And listen, if he can stay out of trouble off the field, he could be one of the greatest picks of all time at number 9. He's just so damn good.
Yeah. I'm also gonna go with the Eagles here at number 3, and I'm gonna say I just love that defensive line. You got Jalen Carter, you got Fletcher Cox, you got Hassan Reddick, who's been one of the more underrated edge rushers in the league for a long time, and got Jalen Hurts, dynamic playmaker on offense. He has two great weapons in AJ Brown and Devontae Smith. Interesting, the running back usage in that game. Not a lot of DeAndre Swift, a lot of Kenneth Gainwell, who seems like he's going to be out for Thursday Night Football. Um, but we'll see how that goes. Rashad Penny, healthy scratch. So they got some guys on that team, and I think they're still one of the favorites in the NFC and would be the best team in the NFC if not for a team that I think we'll both have later on this list.
Yeah. So speaking about that team, a lot of people, I think you included, will have them at number 1. I'm going to leave them at number 2, and it's not anything that they've done. I'm going to keep it real. I think they're the second best team in the NFL, and there's the obvious argument for them at number 1, but I'm going to leave them here. Brock Purdy looked like Brock Purdy looked all of last year. He even looked a little bit better. He was making some more things happen, playing a little bit better in structure. I loved it, and he was just letting his receivers do what they do. He was letting McCaffrey do what he does, and the defense was doing what they do. And it was just such a statement win over the most consistent team in the NFL and the Steelers. Um, that it's hard to argue against them at number 1, but I'm going to leave them at 2.
Yeah, I mean, I'll get to them later at number 1, but certainly can't go wrong with either of these teams in the top 2. So for my number 2, I'm going to go with the Kansas City Chiefs. We talked about them a lot in the Thursday night game, but they're a great team. They'll figure it out. You got Kelsey coming back. You got Chris Jones coming back. Mahomes is too good, even with this kind of lack of clear-cut weapons at wide receiver. He's going to figure it out. I really like Isaiah Pacheco out of Rutgers, 7th-round pick. He looks like he could be a solid bell cow for them. They got Jerick McKinnon, always a fun little gadget player on the offense. They got a defensive unit who I was impressed by their secondary. I was always impressed by Nick Bolton. And yeah, I think probably still the favorites for a lot of people in the AFC despite the tough week 1 loss.
Yeah, absolutely. And to build on that, obviously my number 1 team is the Chiefs. So I haven't lost any faith in them. I think if Kelsey plays, they win. If Chris Jones plays, they win. If any of these things happen independently, they win. And if the receivers catch the ball, they win. Because think about this. On that final drive, let me break it down. They only needed a field goal. So there was a Kadarius Toney drop that would have been a 30-yard gain, which would have put them in field goal range and would have won the game for them. Then there was a completion for 20 plus yards, which also would have put them in field goal range. That was called back. Then there was another drop. Then there was a false start. Then there was one of those plays on 4th and 25 where it's like it wasn't a drop, but it was like it hit your hands, you know? And it was just like I feel like when you got Kelsey in the game for them, just all of these things don't happen. And I think we'll see a lot less Kadarius Toney and a lot more Sky Moore, a lot more Rashee Rice, and a lot of those tight ends. And I think that's going to be much better for the Chiefs going forward than what we saw in this game. And I think that they'll take a lot of what they had that went wrong in this game, build upon it, and be the best team in football going forward.
Yeah, I think it's always tough to bet against the Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes combo. So I probably regret it by putting them at number 2 here. But moving on to my number one team. You just mentioned them. The San Francisco 49ers beat, as you said, the most consistent team in football. They made a Mike Tomlin coach team look like unprepared high school football team. Uh, Kenny Pickett just probably wanted to go back into the locker room immediately, just staring down at that defense. Brock Purdy, Brandon Ayuk was sneakily one of the best route runners in football and had a great year last year. Looked great. They got Debo. They got George Kittle if he can stay healthy. They obviously got Christian McCaffrey. Even Elijah Mitchell I like. So they're a team with a whole bunch of weapons, a good offensive line. And I think, for me, that defense and combination with those weapons makes them the number one team in football.
Yeah, totally fair. And, a lot of people are saying that. And there's a very good argument for it. But I got to stay with my Chiefs.
Yeah, I think that you can go either way, really, with these top two teams.
Undoubtedly. All right, so let's move on to preview Eagles Vikings, which is the Thursday night game. Yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
I was gonna throw this to you, but I'll answer first. A little concerned about, you got no James Bradbury, you got no Kenneth Gainwell, who looked like a big part of that offense. I'm a little concerned against a Vikings team where Kirk Cousins has shown he can throw the ball. I think had a little bit of a rough second half in week one, but you got Justin Jefferson, got Alexander Madison, who I really like, Jordan Addison. He's got weapons. It'll be really telling to see how this Eagles offense plays against a pretty poor Vikings defense. Yeah, I mean, if you had to pick a winner, I'm going with the Eagles, but it'll be an interesting challenge here for the Philly in week 2.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely see that, and I think a lot of how this game goes is dependent on players' health because I think they weren't 100% sure about I think Bradbury is like questionable, he's day to day or whatever. So whether he plays or not, which is unlikely going into a Thursday game at week 2, they'll probably keep him out. And especially with the Vikings who have Justin Jefferson, who now have Jordan Addison. And they've definitely improved on paper than they were last year, but overall, they're going to play much worse this year. I think that this isn't really that much of a challenge for the Eagles, and I think that primetime Kirk is again a no-show, en route to a very easy win for the Eagles.
Yeah, we'll see. They have officially, I think, ruled out Bradbury, Gainwell, and Reed Blankenship at safety there. So we'll see. I think it's closer than you might expect, but certainly Captain Kirk against this Eagles defense, we'll see. I'm not so sure.
Not a fan of that one.
Yeah, but that'll about do it here for us. We'll see you next week for another episode. This has been the Checkdown Pod.
Have a good one.